Hello and thanks for joining us on Encore. Coming up on today's film show, Roald Dahl's outsized hero strides to the rescue in the BFG, two worlds collide when Elvis meets Nixon, and we revisit Minnesota's best-loved crime-fighting forces as Fargo returns to our screens.
Mr. President, Mr. Elvis Presley.
Make sure we get a picture with Mr. Presley and me.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
There's a high-speed pursuit, we got a shooting, and then this execution type deal.
What do you fellas got yourself mixed up in?
Police!
And to take us through all that, I'm joined in the studio by Lisa Nesselson, our film critic. Hi, Lisa.
Hello, Olivia.
Now, we're starting with a film that brings together two names I thought was impossible to unite. It seems impossible they'd have anything in common. Elvis and Nixon. Explain to me that.
Well, some people believe that after you're sworn in as President of the United States, the first thing that happens is that you're taken off to meet the space aliens who actually control everything and whose cowering puppet you'll be for your term in office. Until the current Republican nominee for president, you may have heard of him, Donald Trump, got as far as he has gotten. I thought that was the strangest thing I had ever heard concerning the Oval Office. But an actual encounter there on December 21st, 1970, between Elvis Presley and Richard Nixon is a terrific topic for this film, Elvis and Nixon, which I have to say I enjoyed so much that my dimples actually hurt the next day. Michael Shannon is excellent as the king, and Kevin Spacey does a slightly authentic impression of the guy we all called Tricky Dick. You may be wondering how this strange encounter came about in the first place. Well, Mr. Nixon definitely did not seek it out. In fact, the sitting president didn't even understand how meeting Elvis, who was considered cool, could perhaps rub off some coolness on him. He didn't get that. When he was alive, nobody would have thought that Nixon was remotely cool. Elvis thought the country was in trouble, oddly enough, and all he wanted was a special badge so that he could, he thought, go undercover and infiltrate groups from student protesters to drug dealers and help heal the nation, nothing more, nothing less. He wrote a 6-page letter to the president explaining what he had in mind. I am not making any of this up. Let's take a look at the two gentlemen jockeying for position in the Oval Office.
How many square feet is this Graceland of yours?
Not sure. 10,000, maybe?
Well, that is a fine size for a home, isn't it? Well, it's more than fine. Of course, the White House here is, I think, about 55,000 feet, something like that.
Well, actually, I've made a few additions, so maybe a little more than that, but I don't think it's the size of a man's home that defines him, you know? M&M's are my favorite.
Oh, mine too. So, Mr. Presley, how can I help you?
So once you get your head around the premise of the film, what makes this movie worth watching?
Well, it's a very funny portrayal of human nature and the uses of power. At first, Nixon begrudgingly tells his aides, okay, he'll go along with the meeting because his 22-year-old daughter, Julie, absolutely wants an autographed photo, but he expects the whole thing to be over and done with in 5 minutes. Let's just say that Elvis's powers of persuasion create a longer get-together. Quite seriously, these two actors could not be better. Neither man really looks like the guy he's playing, but you very quickly forget that. These guys were famous for a reason, and they still are. So this was before people were famous just for being famous. Some notes have survived about what may have gone on, what was said, but basically this is an incredibly creative look at what could have happened. Here are the two actors talking about their roles.
Elvis did not like to talk in public or to the press about his beliefs. But in this, you get a chance to see some of what's going on in his mind.
Elvis Presley was concerned about the protests against the Vietnam War. He was concerned about the lack of respect for law enforcement, the lack of respect for the presidency, the Black Panthers, and infiltration by communists. And he was, I think, far more conservative than a lot of people might have suspected.
Well, next we're moving to a film being released here in France this week. That's the BFG, or the Big Friendly Giant. That's directed by Steven Spielberg, but based on the book by Roald Dahl. Very much loved children's classic, personally, by myself. It's not the first of his stories that's been adapted for the big screen.
Absolutely not. I believe I've read everything Roald Dahl ever wrote. I'm a huge fan of his twisted short stories for adults, and of course he had a very, very good sideline in children's books. I think his books, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory and The Fantastic Mr. Fox, were made into wonderful films. I'm referring to the first version of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory starring Gene Wilder, not Tim Burton's version with Johnny Depp. I bought this hardcover edition of the BFG from the Folio Society back in England back when the pound sterling was very, very strong. So this was an expensive investment. The illustrations by Quentin Blake, who at age 83 has illustrated more than 300 books, 35 of which he happens to have written himself, are a delight. They're as appealing as can be, as you can see. Unfortunately, I found the book a terrible slug to get through, and the movie is downright icky to look at. I'm pretty sure I wouldn't have liked it as a kid, and it really rubbed me the wrong way as an adult. Let's take a look. If you like the way this looks, you may like the movie. If you don't, you'll be with me. Let's watch.
Oh, no water.
Give me it. Give me it. Give it here.
Does you have a new little petty poo?
I have to say, I wanted to like it. I tried hard to like it. I saw it under ideal circumstances on the huge screen at Cannes at its world premiere. But it's just yucky. I hate the way the Big Friendly Giant speaks, which is in the book, but made flesh is totally annoying. I don't much care for the 10-year-old orphan heroine Sophie, although she is smart and self-reliant. I hate the look of the 9 not friendly giants who roam the world stealing children and eating them. Richard Brody of The New Yorker called the film, quote, a forced march of fun, end quote. And I think that's about right. Looking at this movie felt like mild punishment to me. The special effects are more creepy than dazzling, except, of course, when the 24-foot-tall Big Friendly Giant manages to hide himself in the streets of London. That was kind of nice. The first hour or so was borderline painful for me. Things pick up when Sophie and the BFG enlist the Queen of England in their plan to cut way back on children being stolen from their beds and eaten. The book spells out that the Big Friendly Giant enjoys passing gas after he eats the vegetarian meals that he eats and the elixir he likes. And the movie, with a script by the late Melissa Matheson, who wrote E.T., makes passing gas into a running gag, with even the Queen's corgis getting into the act. As I would put it, were I Her Majesty, we are not amused.
Oh no, well, less friendly than the giant, perhaps. Well, as you mentioned, the film did have its premiere in Cannes, and France 24's Jeannie Godula sat down with Steven Spielberg, who told us how he seeks inspiration from his personal life.
I was bullied in high school, in elementary school. I was bullied, and I could relate to that. And obviously, it's a scene I sort of did from my own memory. But I was never bullied that way. I was never taken to the top of a hill, stuck on a garbage truck, and sent hurtling toward 2 cars coming at me like roller skates. I was never bullied that way.
Thank goodness.
Thank goodness. But the movies allow us to take our own life and magnify it and exaggerate it and make it more than it ever was.
Well, Spielberg's a man known to have every special effect going at his disposal, but we're now going to a film that could have been made at the beginning of the 20th century. Very lo-fi. It's called Rebelote, a French film starring Jean-Pierre Léaud. It's back on French screens.
Indeed. One of the most glorious things about Paris, and one of the main reasons I've spent my entire adult life here, is that you can go to the movies. Now, surely you're thinking you can go to the movies in most cities on Earth. Current releases, sure, but Paris is special. You can go to a cinema on an ancient street in the Latin Quarter and see a film made in 1982 by Jacques Richard and projected in 35mm. Remember that? Called Rebelote. It's a silent film shot in the manner of a silent film, in black and white, and that's 30 years before the artist reminded filmgoers that it is more than possible to tell a very compelling story in black and white with just title cards and a musical score. Now, this movie is both touching and funny, with a great cast, starting with Jean-Pierre Léaud, who you may know as François Truffaut Dafoe's alter ego, starting as a boy in The 400 Blows. He has never stopped acting since 1959, and in fact, on closing night of the Cannes Film Festival, he was given a special career award. This is the story of a boy who's being treated badly, starting in 1961, grows up to be sort of a rebel. He works for a butcher whose meat is sometimes delivered in coffins. He works as a projectionist in a porn theater. He falls in and out of love. He's in and out of prison. The forces of life and love bear down on him. When I came out of the theater, there were people waiting to see movies starring Olivia de Havilland, who just turned 100. Down the block, there were people lining up for Michael Cimino and Abbas Kiarostami, who recently died. So here in Paris, you can go to the movies.
Yes, you can go to see old movies, indeed, and Jean-Pierre Léaud being as eccentric as ever. Now, speaking of course, of old movies, another film that doesn't feel old but is now 20 years old. The Coen brothers made Fargo 20 years ago. It's been restored. It's being re-released here in France. How does the film's very unique humour hold up today?
I was astonished to realize that it's been 20 years because this film is still very much alive in my memory. It's a rather adorable comedy about murder. Joel and Ethan Coen grew up in Minnesota, and they fill their grim yet amusing tale with local accents and sayings. Joel Coen once won Best Director at Cannes, and the film went on to win a Best Screenplay Oscar for both brothers, and of course, Best Actress for the incomparable Frances McDormand as the local, very pregnant police chief who slowly but surely gets to the bottom of some murders while her mild-mannered artist husband stays at home and supports her efforts. William H. Macy thinks he knows what he's getting into when he hires some guys to kidnap his wife. Everything goes very, very bad. And instead of him using swear words, he says local things like, oh, gee, oh, gosh. It's a lot of fun. See
in a beautiful Minnesota accent. Thank you for that, Lisa. Thanks for joining us this week. We'll leave you with a clip of Fargo. Remember, you can get more news on our website. You can also catch up with Encore on social media. There's more news coming up on France 24 after this.
I'm Jerry Lindegaard. You got the car? You bet. Brand new burnt umber Sierra.
You want your own wife kidnapped?
Her dad, he's real well off.
So why don't you just ask him for the money?
No, they said no cops.
Here's the second one. So we got a trooper pull someone over.
This a new car then, sir?
Oh, it certainly is, officer. Still got that smell.
There's a high-speed pursuit. We got a shooting, and then this execution type deal.